There are 7 little words in Greek that if you know them, you can ask almost anything. And I mean over 90% of the questions that you can think of. Most beginners know either 1 or 2 or 3, but in this video, we're going to cover all 7 of them. My name is Yorgos, I'm a Greek teacher and a Greek native speaker, and I've helped dozens and dozens of students reach a conversational level in Greek, and I'm also the founder of a Greek learning community with over 2,400 people. So without further delay, let's jump into our question words. In Greek, to ask a question, we need to have an inquisitive tone, or in other words, a question type of tone. For example, we can say, Είσαι σπίτι, and that means you are at home. If we want to make that a question, we would say, Είσαι σπίτι. So we would just raise our tone just a little bit towards the end of the phrase. So having covered this, let's jump into our first question word on the whiteboard. So the first question word that we're going to cover is the word τι, and that translates to what. A couple examples that we can see with τι are τι κάνεις, which translates to literally what are you doing, but we use it in the sense of how are you. Another example is τι θέλεις, and that means what do you want. We can also say τι έχεις, and that would be what do you have, in the sense of what's on your mind, what's up with you. The second super useful question word that we will be covering is the word Yiati, which means why. And I cover it exactly right after τι, because Yiati is made from τι. Τι means what, Yiati means why. And we're seeing here the word for ya coming in front of τι, forming Yiati, which means for. So if we break those apart, why is something like for what? For what reason? Γιατί. Why? Let's see a few examples. Γιατί περιμένεις εδώ? And that would be, why are you waiting here? Another example. Γιατί δεν μπορείς να το κάνεις τώρα? Why can't you do it now? Our next question word is the word πού, and that means where. For example, we can say Πού είσαι, which means where are you? Another example would be Πού μένεις, which is where do you live, where do you stay? Πού θα με περιμένεις, where will you wait for me? Super useful.
Super useful.
Next up we have πώς, and πώς means how. For example, πώς είσαι, which means how are you? Another example is πώς σε λένε, and in Greek we translate that as how do they call you, in the sense of what's your name. And lastly, another example is πώς θα ταξιδέψεις, which would be how will you travel. Go into our 6th question word and tell me if so far you're noticing the pattern. There's so many of them that begin with the letter P. And our 6th question word also begins with the letter P. And that is the word Pote. And that means when. A few examples that we can see are Pote θα φύγουμε, when will we leave? Pote θα φτάσουμε, when will we arrive? Pote θα σε δω, when will I see you? We arrived at our 6th question word, and it also begins with a P, like the previous 3, and that word is ποιος. And ποιος can mean either who or which, depending on who you're talking about, who you're asking about rather, or which thing you're asking about. Because as you know, you can be asking about a man, you can be asking about a woman, you could be asking about a masculine thing in Greek, you could be asking about a feminine thing or a neuter thing, because the Greek language has genders. Let's see a few examples to understand this better. Ποιος, it is the masculine form of this question word, and it is generally asked whenever you're not sure about the gender as well. For example, if I say in English, who's here? In Greek, I would say, ποιος είναι εδώ? So I would go for the masculine way of asking because I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman. But if I'm sure it is a woman, then I wouldn't say ποιος, I would say ποια είναι εδώ. Same with when we mean which. I can say, for example, ποια πατάτα θέλεις? And that would be which potato do you want? And because potato in Greek is I patata, that's a feminine word, then the word for which has to change to that feminine version, which is ποια. And lastly, we're arriving at our last question word, which, spoiler alert, it also starts with a P, and that is the word Poso. And same like ποιος, the previous question word, it can also change depending on what you're asking about. Poso can mean how many, but it can also mean how much. Let's go see some examples. Poso κοστίζει? How much does it cost? Poso θέλεις? How much do you want? But as I said as well, it can also change to other genders. For example, πόση ζάχαρη θέλεις? How much sugar do you want? The word for sugar in Greek, I ζάχαρη, is a feminine word, so the word for how much, πόσο, has to change to be in a feminine form. But most commonly we would go for that πόσο version right here. So these were our 7 question words. Super useful because just knowing the 7 question words, you can ask almost any question in Greek. So if you want to take your first step into being conversational in Greek, you can join my free Greek community where I teach you how to speak your first real Greek sentences in just 7 days. The link is in the description down below. Ευχαριστώ και τα λέμε σύντομα.